On today's episode, we're making my daughter's Christmas present a DIY makeup vanity. Stay tuned. So first things first, we're going to cut down our 4x8 sheet of plywood. Now, I marked 24 inches and later dropped it down to 23 by recutting each piece, but you can start by measuring out at 23 inches and this will save you a ton of time. On to our next step. With your main section cut, we're going to cut the sides and tabletop out of the one main piece. We're aiming for two legs, each of 31¼ inches high, and the center is going to be 30 inches wide. This should give you the three pieces you need to form your main table from just one section of the plywood sheet. And as I mentioned earlier, you can save yourself this step by just measuring the 23 inches from the off. I had to do this because I realized not only that 24 inches was too short, but I hadn't actually drawn a straight or actually cut a straight 24 inches, so I had to square up my pieces. With all the pieces cut, now we can give all the edges a quick sand before we prepare to actually begin assembling the main table. Now, one of the things you want to do, especially since what we're going to use is pocket holes, is make sure you've got all the presentable sides of your wood facing in the correct direction, because once you start drilling the pocket holes, there is no going back. You're going to have to use the side that you didn't drill the holes in. So I'm taking a minute to make sure I've got everything, and I almost forgot the main tabletop I had actually put down face down, so I needed to make sure I got it in the correct order to get everything together. Also, to hide the edge of the sides, we're going to mount the table with the top overlapping the legs so there won't be any edges facing upward. And with the shape of our table taking shape, it's time to move on to the backing piece, which will add a little bit of rigidity. Making it 10 inches deep, the width of the inside of the table, we can cut it from the remaining plywood. So here what I'm actually doing is I actually cut the piece to take into account not only for the backing, but this is also going to be the face of the drawer that we eventually build. And there you can see it fits perfectly. Little snug, but it'll fit. So I may have gone a little overboard. I did a rough count. 5 sets of holes on the bottom, which is where I'm drilling now. 3 sets of holes on each side, plus all the holes forming the 2 legs to the top, accounts for 42 screws. Might have gone a little over the top. Now with the main table finished, our last touch is to do this, which is just a rounding edge on the very front. I'm not going to add any trim or stripping to this, so that's why I chose to just give it a rounding edge, because this is probably where hands or forearms will end up resting. So now with the main structure of our table complete, the side, top, and backing, we can move on to the drawer. Now I'm going to make the drawer out of 3/4 inch ply, since that's the material I have on hand. This is going to result in a very heavy drawer. It will be sturdy, but it is very heavy since we're doing it for both the bottom, the sides, the front, back, and the actual face plate, which is what's going to be visible from the outside. Now we're cutting the final piece to its main length here with the track saw and the handheld circular saw, and then I'm cutting it down to the final width on the table saw. The reason I didn't use the table saw originally is because the piece was so large, I would have had most of the wood hanging out in the air. I am planning on making an actual table saw build for this piece of machinery so that way I can work with much larger pieces in the future. Now we can move on to making the sides and the front and back of our 3/4 inch plywood drawer. So this thing's actually going to get mounted on full extension drawer slides, which are rated for quite a heavy duty, so I'm not worried about the size. So after cutting the main section, the main piece that we're going to use to form the two sides off, we can go ahead and run it through the table saw, and this is going to give us the left and the right side. Now I'm actually cutting a piece off of the remainder because it was unusable. It was actually cut at an angle. What's left is what we're going to use to cut off the main section, which is on the opposite side of the blade, and then that is going to be what we actually cut in half to form the front and back of the drawer. So it's going to be a relatively long or deep and very wide drawer, because we're doing one drawer that pretty much runs the entire width of the actual vanity itself. Alright, and here is what the drawer is going to look like. Here's a rough idea. I have one piece off with everything mocked together. Now we're going to be putting this together with wood glue, and I'm probably using way too much, as you can see there that I'm having to wipe it off. But I'm going to be using wood glue and screws. Now instead of using the pocket holes like we did on the tabletop, I'm going to use normal screws and just drill the holes through. You always want to drill your hole to make sure that, especially when you're drilling through something so thin, that the screw itself doesn't split the wood. So with everything put together, the 3/4 inch ply does make the thing very heavy, as I mentioned before, but it's also going to be very sturdy. And we ended up going with one drawer instead of two for simplicity. Our next step is going to be installing the full extension soft close drawer slides. I went with full extension ones because I wanted to be able to see the entire drawer without removing it from the table. Having them installed on the actual drawer was pretty straightforward. Before I went any further, I went ahead and cut the piece that's going to be the fascia, which will form the front of the drawer, which is what you'll actually see. Now, before we put the other half of the drawer slides, which mount to the table itself, I went ahead and made a little template. That's what I'm cutting here on the saw. And this is going to be a little guide that I can put right up against the inside of the table, and this will give me the exact location of where the drawer needs to go. You can see above me, I've already installed one of them, and here I'm just marking the inside measurement of the other drawer to have the drawer exactly where I want it. And with the drawer sides in and one shove, the drawer is mounted. Remember when I said that it was going to be heavy with all that 3/4 inch ply? Yeah. It was like trying to lift a one-sided barbell. Nonetheless, I was still able to stand it up without suffering any serious injury. And all that's left now is to mount the faceplate trim now that the drawer is fully installed. So I actually went ahead and installed the fascia. Unfortunately, off camera, I don't have a shot of that. I ended up setting the drawer into the actual table, so it has a little bit of an overlap rather than being flush. The drawer is complete. The table's complete. The next step we're going to work on is actually making the backing where the mirror and the lights will eventually mount. I took the drawer out because, as I mentioned, being since everything was at a 3/4 inch ply, it was extremely heavy and it was much easier to move without the drawer in it. So for the backing, I actually swapped over to 1/2 inch plywood, which was something I had laying around. I could have done it at a 3/4 inch ply, but since it's really just a backing, most of it's going to be covered. I figured that this lesser quality 1/2 inch ply would work just fine. And I'll let present day Alfred explain the install. Alrighty. So what I've got to do here is, this is 3/4 inch, and this is like 30 seconds or something. It works out to roughly 3/4 of an inch, and then this is 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna take screws I could technically go in on the sides, but we're not gonna do that because I've already got pocket hole screws there. And this is to add rigidity, so I don't want to keep filling the edges full of holes. So what I'm going to do is actually, I might do 1 or 2 on the edges, but I'm going to do the majority here in this backing and then some along the top. Again, being careful because of the pocket holes. While giving the final once over with the sander, I did notice that unfortunately one of the screws had gone through the tabletop itself. So that was going to require a little bit of wood filler, as well as this random crack in the actual 1/2 inch ply. I went ahead and filled that to give a uniform surface later on for the staining. Then it was a little bit more sanding. This is actually the back, just the last touch up. And then right as I was doing a check with the mirror, I realized that for some reason, the very, very top of our backing board wasn't quite parallel with the top of the mirror. So I finished it off with the router. And through the magic of editing, boom, the table has been stained. Now I would love to take credit for this, but this was actually wifey who took this task on. And actually you'll see there a part where I messed it up, placing something on the tabletop because I didn't realize the stain wasn't dry yet. Then what's going to be the next step is actually we're going to be clearing this thing so that we can actually start to work towards our super clear mirror finish. I had intended to actually do the painting outside, but a couple of inconsistent breezes caused me to move inside just to be sure that I wouldn't have any trouble with the actual paint. For coat number 2, we went ahead and actually opened the garage door since the circulation was better. You can already start to see the sheen on the darker side and the sheen building up under the clear. The drawer face and all the other surfaces of the table just get a dusting of clear, really to just form a barrier over the stain. The tabletop was the only one that was going to get a very heavy coat of clear. Now that all the clear has dried and cured, we can move on to the sanding. Now this is the first stage that we're doing. We're using 1000 grit wet sandpaper. Wet being the key word, we're using a lot of water to keep everything lubricated. We're gonna dry it in between as much as we can. Could have done a little bit better job there. The second pass we're gonna do is with 1500 grit. Now we're going up incrementally because we wanna work our way down to a higher grit sandpaper. You can go 1500, 2000, 2500, 3000, but I'm gonna stop at 2000. You can already see the sheen that's building. Even though we still need to polish this, it is getting shinier every single time. Now for the last stage, we're going to hit it with 2000 grit. This is the part where it's going to start to feel as smooth as glass. Now, all of the white stuff that you see dripping down the sides, that's actually a byproduct of what we're doing because that is the granulated clear from the actual sanding process itself. And you can see there as the surface continues to dry that it's actually becoming like a mirror. With the sanding done, we're moving on to buffing. Now this is a machine I bought at Harbor Freight, also bought the pads at Harbor Freight. For the compound, I'm using Meguiar's Ultimate Compound with water sprinkled on to keep the surface lubricated. Here's a quick shot of where we're starting, and then you'll see what happens when we go to do the whole table. I think the results speak for themselves. That is a transformation. So the final step on this is actually attaching the mirror. Now mine, the mirror I used was a framed mirror, so I was able to attach it with screws through the backing into the frame. If you use just the plain glass type, there are kits at Lowe's and Home Depot for mounting those sheet mirrors to a surface. That's all going to depend on what you use. Now for lighting, we're going to be using this LED tracking, and the important thing is these corners. What these corners are going to allow you to do is create a track. Typically they're used for rooms because the kits will sell you 4. I'm actually using 2 in 2 sets to make U-shaped lights that are going to go around the mirror. So here I'm configuring them on a smaller scale with the pieces that were left over from the full cuts, so you guys can have an idea of what it'll look like. So it's going to be 1 bar at the top, 1 bar on the right, 1 bar on the left, 1 bar at the top, 2 corners at the top, and this is what's going to give you the shape that's going to allow you to run the LED strip up one side and down the other, with also having lighting across the top. Now with all of the pieces, or with some of the pieces cut from the first attempt when I didn't have the corners, I can start mocking up the final setup. And here's the first piece. This is the one that's actually going to connect to the power supply. You can see I have one of the corners at the top. Here I'm actually cutting the left side to size so that we can actually finish mocking up the main section of the U to get everything to fit. This is the top section. The other side was actually the same height as the one on the right. And with the other corner, you can get an idea of exactly what it's going to look like. And then we can move on to actually getting the LED strip back together. All right, we're in the home stretch now. Luckily, because I bought a 40-foot section of the LED strip for this, I still have plenty of 1-piece LED strip left over to reattach to the one I cut. So we're going to solder the 2 ends back together, assuming nothing's been damaged in the process of all the headaches I ran into. Luckily, because we're going to be adhering this to the track, the adhesive tape that's still on the back of the strip will add some strength, so I just need to solder the connections. I'm not worried about structure. With the strip passed through the corners, I can go ahead and start putting the whole thing together in preparation for getting it mounted to the vanity. With the initial mounting, I went ahead and mounted the upper right-hand corner with screws, but not the left-hand corner. Putting the whole tracking in and getting the lights to adhere to everything actually became quite hard when the corners were rigidly mounted, but overall the light that it put out was really good. But in the end, I did decide a second strip was necessary. And there you go, a makeup vanity with a massive drawer, backlit. This can also be changed because we use smart lighting. This can also be changed to warm white or anything in between. The thing was pretty simple. The pocket holes save you from pulling in a million brackets. The drawer sides are also available on Amazon. Depending on the size that you want them, you can get them with soft close or without. The knobs are also available online. The only thing that I don't have a real option for is the mirror. The mirror, like I said, was something that we just picked up out of the house last minute because we were going to build this for my daughter for Christmas. The black stain is very, very easy to apply, and the clear, as you guys saw, super, super easy. So if you'd like to build something like this, I'm going to make the plans available. It's not going to be a full comprehensive build guide because I'm just going to make the plan so that you can specify it to the sizes you want and knock yourselves out. It's a really fun project, and the reaction at Christmas time was totally worth the headache. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. As always, for Crooked Mustache, I'm Alfred. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Dale!